Mr. Scary Studios. Number one.
For context, at the time of this story, I am a 24-year-old female. I used to live in a trailer park with a roommate. The neighborhood never felt particularly safe. Sketchy neighbors, flimsy locks, and absolutely no streetlights. But the rent was cheap, so we made it the best out of it. There were two keys naturally, but as my roommate didn't have a car and was chronically forgetful, we figured the easiest way to do was to keep the spare key under an ashtray on the porch. We were very stupid girls. Thankfully, this is one of those lesson learned kind of stories. I usually got home around 9 p.m. and she worked at night. So I more often than not came home to an empty house on this night. I had stopped by the store on the way home, so I'm walking up the steps to the porch, both arms full of groceries and fumbling for my keys. I find my house key and blindly aim it for the lock, and something's wrong with the knob. I feel it and realize the spare key is sticking out of the lock, and the door is open. My blood runs cold, and for a few seconds I'm not sure what to do. I tell myself that my ditzy roommate probably just forgot to take the key out, and stick my hand inside to switch on the lights. I take 3 slow steps into the trailer, eyes darting around anything unusual. Everything is exactly how I left it. Just as I'm starting to calm down, I hear this low whistle from somewhere behind me. Just this long, breathy hoo. The kind of whistle a person makes when they're amazed or impressed by something. I have no idea where it came from, but it's so clear in my memory, it may as well have been right in my ear. That's when the what do I do fear to turn straight up run mode, and what I felt like one motion, dropped all the groceries on the floor, ran outside and slammed the door behind me. I dove into my car and was shaking so badly I had trouble getting the key into the ignition. I kept my eyes on the trailer the whole time. To this day, I'm not absolutely sure, but I think I saw a shadow moving in the kitchen. I tore out of the park and called my roommate. When she answered, I asked as calmly as possible if she had used the key today. When she said no, I started crying and told her what happened. I was absolutely hysterical by that time I got to where she worked. I called 911 and described as best as I could what happened without losing it again. When we arrived back at the trailer, there were 4 squad cars in our driveway, and all the lights were on inside. Officers looked all through the trailer and didn't see any sign of anyone, and nothing had been taken. I told the story again, and despite the smirks on the other cops' faces, the officer I was speaking to could see how shaken I was. And he was very kind and understanding. He assured me that I did the right thing, and told me not to hesitate to call if we noticed anything strange. I was in pieces for the rest of the night. I spent the night at my parents', in my mother's bed, no less, and just cried and shook for hours, trying to fall asleep. I think the worst part about it is how hysterical I was versus everyone else's calm. I felt stupid for getting so worked up over what evidently turned out to be nothing. But I couldn't stop thinking about the shadow in the kitchen and that whistle. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was waiting for me to come home. Obviously, we never left the key outside again, and I never felt safe again until the day I finally moved out.
Number two.
No one could breathe. The air was choked with ash, but there was no wind, so it floated in the air like a mass of dead flies. Cars lay abandoned on the side of the road, some with their headlights still on, barely piercing the ashy air. Everywhere there were signs of destruction. Windows were smashed, allowing the ash to creep in, coating counters like snowbanks. 2 days ago, we had gotten warning that strange clouds were forming, and then government officials had swarmed our little town. They all wore the exact same green hazmat suit, with a dark visor obscuring their face. They did not speak, and they just gestured urgently at us to leave. No skin could be seen under their suits, and when I looked closely at their visors, I could feel their eyes on me, but I could not see any features under the clouded glass. I was the last person in the whole town. My flashlight did not even illuminate the air. A foot in front of me, and my clothes were gradually becoming covered in ash. Then I saw a figure. It looked human-like, but oddly indistinct. As I approached, I saw a hint of green. It was one of the people in the strange hazmat suits. It was not moving. It was standing as still as a statue. I could not even hear it breathing. Then I made a mistake. I shone my flashlight through its visor. Before I could see anything, the thing in the suit twitched violently and screamed. It was a horrific cry. It sounded like a combination of a horse and an angry child. I jerked back in terror. The cry was answered by 20 more around town. I glanced around hurriedly and began to notice green figures advancing towards me in every direction, still making that horrible sound.
Number 3.
To give some context, I am a 28-year-old female, and I currently live in a small town in Missouri. I live in a slightly run-down apartment complex with my roommate and Corgi. Every morning, my alarm goes off at 4 a.m. so I can get ready for my hour commute in St. Louis for school. The first thing I always do is walk my dog so she can relieve herself before the drive. She's a service dog, so she follows me around pretty much everywhere and is generally good about doing her business pretty quickly. Now, the way our apartment complex is set up, there are roughly 13 buildings along a long lane, each with roughly 6 individual units going down the incline of the paved way. At the top of the lane is a little area for kids. It has a play area that has one of those things that look like a treehouse, but is hooked up to a slide and a few other things to entertain munchkins. It's right next to our mailboxes, so sometimes I let Tabitha play with the kids while I check the mail and chat with the neighbors. Normally, when we take our morning walks, however, it's abandoned, and understandably so. Since it's pretty damn early in the morning, this morning, I figured it wouldn't be no different. So Tabitha decided to relieve herself closer to it than normal. So I decided to look around wildly while waiting for her to finish. 9 times out of 10, she's very sociable and loving Wigglebutt. I joke that she doesn't meet a stranger anywhere, and would probably even give her Hitler love. Girl seriously is happy as long as someone's willing to pet her, and has barked all of 2 times in 2.5 years. I've met her, so when I heard her begin growling and snarling, it broke me out of my half-awake daze. I froze when I saw what was causing her to tense. In the play area, I saw the outline of a fully grown man crouched down, silhouetted against one of the street lamps. His large eyes were watching us carefully. We don't have a homelessness problem, so this took me by surprise, and at the same time made me terrified. After a few moments of silence, he began to hiss and slowly stand up as far as he could without banging his head against the wooden roof of the play area. Move along, 12C, my apartment number fuck. This caused Tabitha to begin going nuts in hindsight. She reminded me of a squirrel on meth, basically a tiny dog with an attitude of a giant. Without so much giving him a second glance, I yanked on her leash and began bolting it towards my apartment, shaking as soon as I let her off her leash in sight. She stood vigilant at the locked doorway, teeth bared. I'd like to think I would have called for help even if the thought of my complex's kids hadn't crossed my mind, but I can't make that promise that I would have. One of my friend's dad is a cop that lives less than 5 minutes away, and he was my immediate call when I was able to make coherent speech patterns. He told me to wait inside until he told me it was okay to leave. He and his partner, who was working a late night shift that night, came out to investigate the area. By then the man had bolted. However, they found footprints around the area, along the needles with cut up lengths of rope. Needless to say, my morning walks are going to be a lot more guarded now. Hissing man